Welcome everybody to today's session. Today I'm going to be talking about how the stages of change go along with recovering from an addiction. And it's important to know that when somebody changes something, especially an addiction, they go through a series of change. Whether you're the person struggling with an addiction or you're a loved one of someone struggling with an addiction, it's important to understand these stages, because depending on what stage someone is in or what stage you're in will determine how successful you'll be in recovery. And if you're a loved one watching this, it's also important to understand these stages, because then you know how to approach and what to expect from someone that's struggling with an addiction. These stages come from a book called Changing for Good, and I highly recommend reading it. It's a really good book on understanding these and understanding what it takes to be successful in change. There are 5 stages that are important to understand. And the first of these is called PreContemplation. PreContemplation is the proverbial denial stage. When someone who struggles with an addiction is in PreContemplation, one, you're probably not watching this video, or they're not watching this video because they're in denial. And to them, they don't have a problem. If they're approached or confronted about their addiction, they get really defensive. Again, they say, I don't have a problem, I can stop anytime, or they deny using altogether, or deny their addictive behavior altogether. To them, again, they don't have the problem. Really, everybody else around them has the problem. If you're the loved one watching this or a friend, you have the problem. It's everybody else's or the world's problem, not theirs. These people in this stage are pretty easy to pick out. They're not trying to stop, they don't want to stop, and they don't have any plans to stop in the near future. The second stage of change is called contemplation. Contemplation is just as it suggests, they're thinking about, they're contemplating change. Again, if you're struggling with an addiction, you know you have a problem, you can admit that, and you're thinking to yourself, I know I need to change this at some point, and I want to change this at some point. The important thing to understand here is that you're not ready to change right now. I know that, and it's important for family members and loved ones to understand, even if they may admit they have a problem, they may not be ready to change just yet. But at least and hopefully change is on the horizon. Now again, that horizon could be a ways away. It could be months away. It could be years away, unfortunately. But they at least can talk about it, and they at least can acknowledge to themselves and others that there is a problem and that they do have an addiction, or at least their behavior is creating enough problems in their life that they know they need to change it down the road. The next stage of change is called preparation. Preparation is the planning stage of change. They know they have a problem, they want to change, and they're starting to do the research and do their homework and make plans on how they're going to change. This may be reaching out for help, going to counseling, going to a 12-step or support group, checking into rehab or treatment. There's a variety of ways to start to get help. The important thing in this stage of change is, again, they're thinking about it and planning it for themselves. They're not being forced to stop or to change. They want to change themselves. It's important to probably right here take a pause and talk about the importance of people wanting to change themselves. And so as we look at these first stages, pre-contemplation, they don't want to change. If you try to make them change, you're only going to frustrate yourself and them. Or if you're yourself are being forced to change and someone's making you change and you're in pre-contemplation watching this, I know you're frustrated because you don't want to change or you don't have a problem. If you're contemplating, then again, you're wanting to, but again, if you're not ready and wanting to make that change right now, you're not going to. And if you're the loved one watching this, they're not going to. So you can't force them to make that change. And if they're in preparation, they're getting close. Again, change is is pretty close. They're starting to make those preparation efforts, and they want to. After preparation is the stage that we all really want to be in if we want to change or we want our loved one to be in. And that's called action. Action is just that. It's doing. It's starting to implement the plan that's been being worked on. They're going to counseling. They're going to 12-step meetings. They're stopping the behavior or putting every ounce of their effort into it. They're putting their money where their mouth is. So this is an exciting stage of change. This is where we start to see results in ourselves or in someone that we love, that we want them to overcome an addiction. Now, if you're in action, don't expect perfection. Don't expect that you'll never slip or your loved one will never slip. Now, maybe they won't, and if that's the case, fantastic, more power to you. But oftentimes, slipping or relapsing is part of the change process. Now, I'm not saying it has to, but it oftentimes is, and we don't want to get discouraged or frustrated when it happens. Let's take a break and talk about slips and relapses. I think that's important at this point. For me, they're two very different things. To me, a slip is making a mistake, having a weak moment, picking up the addiction or engaging in it a time or two, and then coming to yourself and going, wait a minute, what am I doing? And getting back on track and getting back into your plan in action fairly quickly. A relapse is getting back into the old behavior completely for an extended period of time, and maybe even slipping back into pre-contemplation and denial. But even if there is a relapse and you go back to using, or they go back to using for an extended period of time, they can still get back to where they were. They still learned a lot of things in their recovery process that they can get back into action fairly quickly if they want to. And it's really important to understand that to be successful in action, you also have to have what we call as self-efficacy. And this is the belief in yourself that you're capable of change. And this is where I find most people struggle in recovery from an addiction. They don't believe that they're capable, or they just will always see themselves as an addict. And they don't just see themselves as sober. And if that's the case, that's a big hurdle to get through. That's where I would say getting some professional help and getting some counseling will be crucial and important to be successful in the change process. Because you have to get to a place that you believe that you are truly capable of overcoming this addiction. And I can tell you that I believe wholeheartedly that every addiction, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether it's eating, whether it's gaming, whatever your addiction of choice is, it is overcomable. There is hope. There is success in recovery. I've seen it in every one of those. So if you think you're incapable of change, I'm telling you you're wrong. If you think your loved one's incapable of change, I'm telling you you're wrong. They are, you are. Again, it doesn't mean you will, because you have to be willing to put forth the effort and to do whatever it takes to make that change. And some people have to change a lot in their lives, almost everything, to be successful, depending on where they're at in the addictive process. The final stage of change is maintenance, or this is what I call recovery. This is where you're living your change on a consistent basis for an extended period of time. Now, to be in maintenance, I don't believe you have to be thinking about recovery 24/7, but you have to be mindful of it, and you have to be aware that at any given time the thinking can come back, the thoughts, the complacency, the maybe I can do this just a little bit. I've had some sobriety and now maybe I can engage in it for a little bit. That's not the case. If you've gotten to a point where it's become an addiction and it's really challenging your life, then I would strongly encourage not going back to it ever. Now, in the beginning, it can be really hard to think about never again. And I encourage people not to really have this focus. There's the old adage that recovery happens one day at a time, maybe one moment at a time, 1 second at a time. The important thing is that in the beginning of recovery, you really understand that. You just got to get through each day, each moment, each half a day, whatever the case may be for you. But as you do and those start to stack up, you will get to a point where you can maybe then understand and even believe that, okay, I can maybe get away from this and never do it again. But in the beginning, I know the word never again or the phrase never again seems overwhelming and may set yourself up for failure. So don't tell yourself that. Tell yourself, I'm going to be clean and sober today or this moment. And that's what you have to get through. So these are the stages of change. And I always tell people, whether it's the person struggling with an addiction or a family member, that if you're not in action or maintenance, your chances of relapse, I believe, are 100%. So that's to say, if you're in pre-contemplation, contemplation, or preparation, you're probably going to be engaging in your addiction. Or if you try to stop for someone else in those stages, you'll probably slip or relapse. You need to be in action for yourself. You need to be in action because this is something you want to do. Now, I understand that to start, you may be getting into recovery because somebody else wants you to, a parent, a spouse, a boss, whatever the case may be. But eventually, to be successful long term, you do have to want it for yourself. But you can start for someone else. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gives you a better understanding of the stages of change and what it takes to be successful in overcoming an addiction. I can also say that overcoming addiction is one of the most difficult things that people can do in this life. They're addicting for a reason. But again, there is hope and there is change. If this was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and please make a comment that it was. Just say, thanks, this was helpful, or I really like this part. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. And also share this with someone else that may be struggling with an addiction. Until next time, make it a great day and make it a great week.